Find some sort of support network. If it's never search alone, you don't need a friend group. In fact, strangers are encouraged. Yep. Pair yourself up with a couple of other people and go through this process with someone else. A lot of people are getting laid off kind of en masse. So if maybe you have some former colleagues you could reach out to and have just kind of informal stand-up. Having something that gives your day a little bit of routine, a little bit of structure helps kind of bring a sense of normalcy to this, because it can be tough kind of going out alone.
Welcome to the JobQuest Podcast, where we treat the job search as a hero's journey. And we're talking with all kinds of job search heroes, as we like to call them. So career coaches, recruiters, job seekers, some who found jobs, some who are on the job hunt. And I know you fall into that category. So I want to welcome product designer Rob Brogan to the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, really excited to have you here. So just to kick things off, could you tell us about your own career journey and your own current job quest?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a winding path. I visualize it. I kind of come in the non-traditional route, although I hesitate to say there is a traditional route. I guess I would think someone who goes to college for design is more the traditional route going into a design job. But in reality, I almost feel like that's the minority of all of my peers. At some of the bigger agencies I've worked at, I did meet some people who have, an MFA in art or design. But actually, now we have a lot of people coming in through these boot camp courses. And then you have some self-taught folks. I guess I fall into that category. I went to school for languages. I studied Spanish and psychology. So I was just fascinated with how kind of people see the world and interact with it. And I'd always been kind of a big tech guy, but never thought of myself as a programmer or a coder. So I long kind of eschewed that path of computer science. Fast forward a few years, though, and someone had told me about user experience design, which was this, I think of it as like a middle ground between the final visual result of the interface and kind of the brand design that you would recognize on a web page. And then, of course, the deep kind of background, the code, and the engineering that goes into it. User experience is more of the strategy of how you can shape coming in the front door or the home page and all the way through a checkout, if this is an e-commerce type of experience, or if it's a media type of experience, how you find what you're interested in watching. And I've always been really interested in that type of space. So that's kind of the earliest origin of someone just making me aware that this was a job at all. And back then I tried applying to a design school here in New York, SVA, for their master's, because I thought, okay, if I want this job, I have to go back to school. Yeah. They asked for my design portfolio, and I said, you're supposed to teach me design. I don't have one. So I didn't get into SVA. And kind of serendipitously, a friend of a friend had made some sort of connection at a conference, and they knew that I was interested in getting into this. And that person gave me an opportunity as a junior designer. My job title was information architect in my first job. Okay. And it's also funny. Don't know how much of a tangent we want to get off on this, but sure. Design job titles have changed kind of every couple years. They like to change it up. And really? Information architecture kind of felt to be the esteemed version of user experience. Now, if there's any actual designers listening to the show, those are different disciplines. But companies, as we know, will kind of put the job title regardless of what your actual tasks are. So I was an information architect, mostly doing wireframes and content strategy for websites, which is really kind of organizing what the company has to say about itself and where you can navigate and get its products. Then at another job after that, kind of the second agency, and agencies, by the way, are a great place in early career to get portfolio diversity because you have multiple clients, every few months. So you could say you've worked on a bank, an insurance company, a cruise liner, whatever type of company, you get a lot of that variety and I found a lot of support from kind of the senior managers at these agencies. But the next job title after that was interaction designer, which also sounded pretty cool. Technically, interaction design is kind of narrowly focused just on the movement and how, when you press on a button, what happens. You think of like in the phone app when you're looking at photos, you can kind of pinch to zoom in your photo grid and it gets larger or smaller. And that's an interaction design.
Okay.
Obviously, you can't spend your entire day job just doing that stuff. So once again, I was doing wireframes, content strategy, and some like user experience flows, which just document how you navigate through the site or the app. And yeah, I think that was a really great foundation for me. And after some more of that agency experience, I'd say that was probably all in all, maybe 4 years or so, I got a job at Amazon, which the title there was UX designer, but I consider that sort of my first shift into product design. I think of product design as someone who is really essentially focused on one product and going through this iterative cycle of improving it, experimenting, you're checking the analytics, seeing how your design decision is performing and making necessary changes along the way.
Okay.
At an agency like where I was before, you might have one opportunity to do, like an A/B test, but usually it's a client with kind of a brief and you create the one solution and hand it off to them.
Yeah.
And you don't cycle back so much.
Yeah.
In product design or just in-house design, you are on retainer there. So you get to work on that piece of the product over and over and really polish it, which as a designer was the most rewarding part for me.
Yeah, so that must have been pretty exciting to land at Amazon. I mean, when in just a couple of years you're starting with no design experience and you're trying to figure out how do I get into this field, and then you get some jobs and you're working for agencies and you do a couple of things, and then how did that feel to get to land the Amazon gig? Yeah,
it was really great. I had a friend who was working at Amazon, and I had hoped that he could kind of get me a connection in, and it didn't work out at the time. And almost serendipitously, a few months later, a recruiter reached out to me from Amazon, and it's just so funny thinking about how competitive it is to get in there. I'm not sure why they even bother reaching out to people. I'm sure they have lots of people kind of applying, but maybe they look at certain backgrounds, certain firms that you're working at that might pique their interest. I, at the time, was at this design company called Fjord. It was a studio, nice little boutique. Well, little. It was international, but the New York office was a small kind of one-floor studio. Okay. Everyone's listening to their Sonos kind of background music, very chill design environment. It got acquired by Accenture, which is this, huge multinational consulting firm. So maybe there's an aspect of that kind of picked up on the radar. But anyway, I was definitely excited to jump on that opportunity and go over in-house. And so that came through a recruiter. So maybe that's a good transition to talk about the role of recruiting in your career, because I know that's been, as we talked a little bit before, that's been really important for you. And I wonder, I think that's probably true for a lot of folks in tech. I mean, a lot of jobs in general. It's a competitive job market across the board. And so when you've got 1,000 applicants for a job, a company can be well served to work with a recruiter who can give them vetted talent. And I know that's been a strategy of yours, right? Can you talk about how recruiters have helped you in your career journey? Yeah, for sure. It's kind of starting at the end almost. I recently was trying to hire a second designer at this startup I was with. And I remember I just put a post on LinkedIn, not even a job opening, and got 16 applicants in like 15 minutes. And then I had to take it down because it was going to take me a while to talk to those 16 people. And of course, I would have to do all the vetting. I don't know if any of them would be, worth talking to. Right. And so I can't imagine a company hiring without a recruiter. But it seems like they do, or they have a mix of both, where they have kind of just inbound leads and then they hire a recruiter to sift through all those. But I can't speak too much for recruiters, but I know vaguely there's sort of the retained search recruiter who, has a few clients and they go and hunt the best candidates for that role. And then you have, kind of I don't know what you would call it, the full-time recruiter who works for the company. Yeah. And they're, maybe they're doing more of that fielding of the application. But to get back to your original question, I feel like when I look back on my different jobs, except for that very first one that was friend of a friend who gave me a chance, so grateful for that opportunity. After that, it was always through recruiters that I got jobs. I definitely sent out applications in between jobs, a lot of applications, and tried, a few different versions of my resume, but I only got traction when I spoke to a recruiter. And really thankful for them. I think that they do take the time to sort of set up this conversation, maybe a little bit like what we're doing right now, tell you a bit about my background, and they also know what their client is looking for, and they probably do a little bit more of that work storytelling and pulling out the pieces of your experience that are relevant and that are going to pique the interest of the client. So maybe it has to do with how they pitch me as a candidate. Yeah. Whereas when you're on your own, you've just got this PDF, hopefully, AI optimized or something to get through the door. Yeah. And then hopefully no one reads anything as a user experience designer. I've learned, you're lucky if they read the first couple sentences. So, hopefully their eyes fall on a couple of bullet points that are promising, and they want to have a phone call with you. Right. And so I think the recruiter is just, an actual human kind of advocate out there for you. So yeah. At Fjord, that agency, I was a recruiter. And then at Amazon, that was an in-house recruiter that worked for Amazon. And then after that, I worked at an education marketplace called Teachers Pay Teachers. And that was the same recruiter from Fjord, who worked for Fjord, sorry. And then after that, I guess this is an exception. I followed a friend to this startup after Teachers Pay Teachers.
Okay.
Yeah.
But still... personal connection there as opposed to just sending in a
exactly
cold resume.
Yeah. So basically I've had 0% success applying to a job with just a resume.
Yeah.
in my 13-14 years.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people can relate to that. And that's definitely a theme that has come up throughout my conversations on the podcast here is networking is so important, and it's the human connections that you make that are going to get you that job. So what you're saying totally makes sense. So fast forward to the present moment, you get laid off, right, at your current job, which a lot of people can relate to. Definitely in tech, there's been a lot of layoffs to go around. And so first thing you do is call up the recruiter. I mean, take us through that process.
Yeah. So the recruiter who had got me two of my great jobs in the past, reach out to her and kind of ask, do you have any clients that might be a good fit for me? At this point, she knows me pretty well and my background. No fault on either side, just didn't have anything that lined up for what her clients needed at the moment. But she, is really great, always looking to help, and recommended this book, Never Search Alone, which kind of gave me this framework to help navigate this job search without a recruiter, and also not entirely alone, because, without a good recruiter connection, you can kind of feel like you're just swimming out there alone. But at the same time, you're aware, you see all these posts on LinkedIn about the thousands of people laid off from Meta or Google or Amazon. And you're not the only one looking, but it still feels like you're the only one. So how can we kind of pool all of these resources and cool websites and spreadsheets together to make something useful?
Yeah, well, and it feels like you're in competition with all these people too, right? Like, oh my God, not only am I out here feeling alone, but now I know there's all these other qualified people on the market as well, right? So how did this book make you feel? Like they encourage actual peer groups and connection Slacks and things like that. So can you talk about like what was useful in in the never search alone strategies?
Yeah, I think that the book, which I listened to a couple of times on Audible, it's a pretty quick listen, and it covers a very kind of stepwise strategy to start broad by understanding who you are and what you bring to the table. So some introspection, and then giving you a framework to reach out to people that you've worked with in the past. And all of this is around kind of honing your definition, your story of who you're going to pitch for those job applications, and navigating through this process. You could do it by yourself and just read the book, but they really encourage having this social element and this peer group support. So after you read the book, or you could sign up whenever you want, I guess, but for me, I did this after I finished the book. Phil.org, just to give a little plug for them, it's PHYL, and you can go and see about the book, download free resources. They have kind of this big PDF of, I forget what it's called, like a just laid off checklist, things to do, including, mental health care advice and, get a counselor, a therapist, or read some philosophy and all that stuff. But then they also have this Google form, which will match you up with people who may not have the exact same job. So, for example, I haven't talked to any designers, but people who are of a similar seniority. I've been working for 13 plus years, and I'm at kind of a very senior, but I'm not really in a management type of position. So they put me with other people who are in the product world, or even in engineering type of roles that are at that similar level. And it almost helps, I think. I like a little bit of both, to be honest. It'd be great to have a little bit more designer input, but I think there's also something to be said of being paired up with strangers and also people who are from a different discipline in order to give you more of an objective look. Again, it kind of comes back to the storytelling. And if you're giving a pitch, you're writing a little blurb at the top of a resume or the little synopsis on your LinkedIn. The book really encourages to take out any jargon, any words that you used internally at your company, or even acronyms that you might think are common, like CRM or SEO, and just explain it, to someone who has no idea what your job is about. And so having that kind of third-party outside industry feedback is pretty helpful for crafting that type of story.
Yeah. So are you doing actual calls with these people? What is the mechanism for communication? Is it just through the Slack or
yeah?
How does that work?
You've got the Slack for the sort of asynchronous advice and one-off questions, but they really encourage you to choose a path. The book is also great for people who do have a job. Kind of want to throw that out there in case there's an assumption this is only for people who are, actively laid off or looking for something right now. Yeah. It's also for career switchers as well. Yeah. So the first thing you do is you kind of choose what track you want. You have the currently employed slow schedule. I believe it's every other week you would check in with your group and do one of those steps in the book, and then check back later. The active searcher, someone who wants to go as fast as possible, could meet twice a week. And so that's what I did for a while. Now we've
it's like a Zoom call?
Yeah, Zoom call, Google Meet, whatever you want. It's very kind of self-organizing. Yeah. And after we went through all the steps in the book, I think maybe 10 steps? I'm probably going to get this wrong, but check out the website. And after you go through all the different steps, you may not have as much kind of momentum to meet twice a week. So we dialed it back to once a week. And so it's more of an ongoing request for help opportunity and just checking in on how people are doing. Yeah. A big theme that's reiterated throughout that book is being comfortable with asking for help, which I'm still trying to learn to grow on doing that, especially out publicly on places like LinkedIn. But I'm definitely comfortable asking my peer group for help.
You mentioned to me in a previous call that not only did you do the Never Search Alone peer groups, but you also organized your own peer group with a former coworker. That you said you guys had this stand-up meeting while you were working together, and then as you both found yourselves on the job market, you decided to just keep that going. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's kind of a force of habit almost. I worked with this product manager at Teachers Pay Teachers, and so we had a really great team and great energy and really good collaboration. It just felt like we were always on the same page about stuff. And after Teachers Pay Teachers got acquired, and through anyone who's been through an acquisition, I've been through a couple, it almost never keeps the culture. So, the company culture inevitably changes. And I stuck around for a little bit just for the job security, but ultimately I saw that, the product manager I had worked with, he went to this startup. And I thought, you know what, more than anything, for me, the most important aspect in my day-to-day job is the people I work with. And because you can do all types of work anywhere, but you got to go in every day and work with someone. And so I followed him to this startup, and very fast-paced startup, worked together, every day, having our stand-ups and check-ins along the way, staying in sync on the work. And then it came to this abrupt halt when the co-founders decided to get rid of the whole product organization. So both of us, along with a few of the engineers, were laid off. And it was kind of this convenient setup with, that Never Search Alone mindset of having someone to navigate this with. I did decide to kind of keep a separate Never Search Alone group, going through their website and pairing up on their Slack community. But I kept checking in with this product manager on a daily basis. We had a daily stand-up, just a 15-minute time slot that we throw on the calendar. And honestly, it was a lot less structured than the book. We weren't going through any steps. We were just checking in with each other. And I think that's mostly on the mental health side of things, of just having something in the morning to get out of bed and, get on the computer and say, all right, what's on your plan for today? What are you looking out for? Or do you have any opportunities lined up? How can I help? Of course, we did basic stuff like the resume feedback and LinkedIn advice, but really it was just kind of some encouragement, sharing what we saw on the landscape. Even though we're looking for two different roles, we're both in the same kind of tech bubble. So seeing what's out there and sharing tools and websites that are helpful for like practicing your interview or shaping up the resume. It was kind of just a great kind of ping pong.
Yeah, I'll bet. So it sounds like that was really helpful with the mental grind, which I can imagine would be the case, because as you're trying to do something alone, especially something as stressful as a job search, and oftentimes, it can feel like I'm just going to do these same things again. They didn't work yesterday. Like you have to you have to just not think about that sort of negative self-talk and just keep thinking positively that it's going to work eventually. So I need to keep on going through this process. So it sounds like that was really helpful. How else do you manage the mental grind of this process? Yeah,
I think I also put it in for me, the challenges are kind of like in two buckets. There's the almost like doing the laundry of sending out the applications. And that's just a little bit more of kind of a grind in the sense of just task management. Maybe I want to send out 3 or 4 a day, and I want to be kind of mindful of if this is a good fit for me. Maybe I'll take time to kind of write a little bit of a cover letter. So that aspect can be draining. And I think to counteract that, it's important to always have fun and to just get some fresh air if you can. Just really basic stuff. I mean, I started baking bread. I was never successful during COVID for some reason. I couldn't get it to rise. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try again. And so started making some nice rosemary focaccia bread. And
sounds good.
Walking around my neighborhood, really like, where I am in Brooklyn. And spending time with my wife, of course, and just disconnecting. The other bucket, I feel like, is a little bit more challenging, although you still kind of solve it with the same type of things is the actual interviews themselves. So when you do get that hook and you have the conversation, and at least with tech interviews, there's usually 4 or 5 rounds. And I've had several cases where maybe I'll get to the 3 out of 5 and you've kind of talked about yourself, and then you have another meeting where you kind of talk about all of your past work. And I don't know how it is for other types of roles. I know like engineering job applications, they have a lot of like tests for like coding. But for me, it feels like it's justifying that you do know how to design and that you are a good designer. And there's this sense of doing it over and over again. It becomes very draining. And when it doesn't lead to success, it leads to a lot of self-doubt of, am I a good designer? Right. Do I know what I'm doing? Yeah. And, I don't know how this is for other fields, but I just kind of compare this to my wife, who's a physician, and she just got a job here lined up, and her process took about a month from application to offer. And obviously physicians are in higher demand, but also I remember in her interviews and just the resume in general, it's a little bit less focused on, do you know how to be a doctor? And it's more, where do you want to work? What type of patients do you want to help treat? What kind of population are you interested in? And it's more, if I'm thinking about product design, it's more like, what are your goals? And on the other hand, at least in tech, there's no certification, there's no license, there's no even ground that everyone's playing in. So now you have 1,000 people applying to a job, and you have to have every person that you want to have an interview with explain that they do know how to do the job. I wish we could just kind of skip that step and just go to the, company fit. That's just getting a little bit off my chest, kind of going off on a tangent. But I think that, coming back to your friends, people who know you well, and just hearing a little bit of that reassurance that, you've had several jobs. You do know what you're doing. It's just a tough market. It's highly competitive, and it's nothing personal, but it can feel personal after a while.
As job seekers are, there's obviously pressure to get the job, and you feel like you want to impress the employer and all that, but the employer's also got to impress you. And I think that's an important thing that job seekers often forget, right? Yeah. Is like, just any job is not necessarily what is going to be best for me. I also need to find a job where I'm going to actually be happy, where I'm going to like the work and like the people that I'm working with and like the culture. So what sorts of things are you interviewing employers for? Like how are you vetting the types of people and the types of places that you're looking to work at? Yeah.
I think to a small degree, it even starts on the job description. I've had some job descriptions that are written by AI, which I kind of just consider to be a red flag. You only have to write it once, and then 1,000 people will apply. So like, you put a little, more effort into it and tell me about your company. So I kind of steer away from things that are a little bit kind of robotic. Also things that seem just, I don't know how to describe it, bare bones, just kind of focused on the crucial pieces of the job. When they talk about the role requires, and then they have those bullet points of, 5 years of experience doing user experience, expertise in, insert software name. That's definitely fine if it's accompanied with other things like interest in mentoring other colleagues, or, maybe it's highly collaborative, involving external stakeholders, or something that kind of, it can be businessy, but it still hints at how you connect with other people at the company. If it doesn't have that, and it's just kind of the skeleton of, that's the definition of a design job, you haven't told me anything about what this job is. I feel like that's something that I avoid as just not interesting. And then things that attract me are, the mission-driven type of company. Every company, I'm sure, has a mission, but it's how you communicate that, how much you care about it. Because I think that also, from a designer point of view, that you have this process of iterating and trying new things to see what works. And if you apply that to a company with a mission means you have this kind of guiding light or direction to go.
Right.
And you can take kind of a little bit of a zigzag path to get there. I think without a clear mission or an aspiration, you might fall into this trap of a leader who wants a specific thing. I want this product. I want it to look like this, or I want it to do this. And you can build that, but then what? Where do you go from there? And it can be a little chaotic. Maybe you quickly change direction. So anyway, that's just kind of another cue of something that I feel is something I would want to avoid, is a lack of a mission or kind of a guiding North Star to what the company's all about.
Makes sense.
Really, the most important part to me is the people I work with. And that's impossible to tell from the job description or, a little bit on that culture page on the About Us, pictures of, people playing croquet or something or having ice cream. I think that's nice, but it can also be performative. So you're not sure like how real it is. I think you just have to wait for the initial couple of rounds of interviews. Hearing how on that screener call, how they describe the company and like the changes over the last maybe 6 months. But then for me, the clincher is really talking to the hiring manager, which is usually after that first screener call.
Okay.
And I always ask them about the team, tell me about who would I be working with? Am I going to be working with some other designers there? Maybe it's a small company. I'm the only designer. Who would I be collaborating with on a day-to-day basis? And, what's that kind of rhythm look like? I try to get them to describe a little bit a day in the life, and that helps me get a sense of, where I would like to be.
And what are you listening for when they're describing that day in the life?
Something that is collaborative, and I feel like collaborative is kind of a cliche or overused term, especially in design, but people who really like to come at a problem together and not at sort of, okay, I own this part and you own that part and you kind of stay in your lane. But people who are okay just sort of blurring the lines a little bit and seeing how they can all work together towards that one goal or challenge. I don't really know what a perfect answer would be, but I think I really like team structures that have this product trio model. I think Marty Kagan might have been the first product guy to talk about that. I don't necessarily know the origin of it, but it's a team that's built on this collaboration between the product manager, product designer, and an engineering lead. And so even though you could have a broader team of various kind of individual contributors, I would be part of that little tripod structure that's involved on all the decisions. Amazon, for example, as great it is on the resume, was a little bit more of a top-down structure. The product manager would come to our little design group with a fully detailed PRD, which is a product requirement document saying this is exactly what needs to go into the page and how the feature needs to work. And it would leave a little room for the imagination, which as a designer, of course, you want a little bit of imagination, room to kind of experiment with ideas.
Right.
So that's an example where I was never collaborating with a product manager at Amazon. It was just kind of like, here you go, get started. And then likewise, I feel bad. We did the same thing to the engineer. Here's the design, it's all done. You can go build that. Whereas most of the other companies, it's a lot more, hey, we're all working on this for, this month. And, we kind of share our updates along the way.
Okay, so you've got that background and that experience in different environments. So based on what somebody's telling you, you can kind of, it matches up in your brain. Like, oh, that sounds more like the Amazon experience, which I didn't necessarily love, or it sounds more like that startup experience, which maybe was more the kind of style that I want to work in.
Exactly. That's a great way to summarize it, is just kind of drawing on my experience of getting a feel of what does the team structure look like? What's the product kind of plan? How does that unfold at that company? And does it look and feel like, the jobs I've enjoyed or the jobs that I hadn't enjoyed as much?
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got some leads now, I understand. That's exciting. What's your strategy for managing leads, and what are your kind of expectations and prospects looking like, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely heavily used LinkedIn. I am a bit frustrated with the actual functionality of finding jobs on there. I will say that could be a whole other podcast episode if you want to critique the design of LinkedIn. But as far as inbound, I get a lot of recruiter messages through there. Okay. I will say, just throwing out kind of a hot tip. With the way I did my LinkedIn, I had just the job title usually, like I would have on a resume, UX designer, product designer, lead product designer, all the way up. And I started doing a little dot, and this is not groundbreaking. I've seen other people do it, where you throw in a little dot or a hyphen, and you put in one or two words of what was the focus at that company. So, teachers pay teachers. I did a lot of work on the seller side of this marketplace. So I'll say marketplace seller experience, or at this startup that I was at more recently, it was all about growth and new user onboarding. So I'll, product design lead - growth, onboarding, acquisition. And like I said a while back, nobody reads, and that's just human. So if you have a couple of keywords up there in the title, I think that catches their attention. And I've noticed, kind of coming back to the inbound stuff, a lot of recruiters are reaching out to me about their growth opportunities at, startup or medium-sized companies. We want someone, to help the acquisition, kind of top of funnel for our product. And this is something that I learned through my peer group with Never Search Alone, about looking back on my experience, that I happen to have a lot of experience on marketplaces. That's not where my heart is per se, but right now it's this sort of packaging yourself as this is where a lot of your experience lies. So, target that type of job, for the near term. And I manage those basically by just saying yes to everything, even if I'm doubtful, or sometimes it'll be a 6-month contract job, which I don't think is usually a good fit. I'm looking for full-time, or maybe a really short-term kind of contract. But introduce yourself, always take the call, give them your story, and you never know. I've had plenty of recruiters, it doesn't work out for that job, but they'll come back a couple weeks later with something else. Yeah. You're in their system and, hopefully on their mind. Yeah. And then I have once in a while, kind of just a cold email will come in. I'm guessing that's also through LinkedIn, but they just choose to do an email. And I always reply to those. So I think that those quickly turn into a calendar invite. So the short answer to your question is calendar invites. I have my calendar kind of booked out for the recruiters that reach out to me. And then on the outbound, when I'm applying to jobs, I'll often use a form filler tool. Importantly, not writing anything for me in terms of like crafting a description. It's just filling in the rudimentary name, do you need a visa to work in this country type of questions. And then
the dreaded Workday form.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you use this Chrome plugin that fills that in for you, after you hit submit, it saves that URL that it filled for you. So you can also go to that plugin's website and see a dashboard of all the places that you have previously filled out forms on. So I don't have to do that work, of keeping track of where I've applied to places.
Yeah. Do you have, as we're coming to the end of time here, do you have and this is a spur of the moment question, but do you have like a top tip for other job seekers who might be in a similar boat as you are?
I feel like I can't think of a single top tip. Well, I guess the most important one for me is find some sort of support network. If it's Never Search Alone, you don't need a friend group. In fact, strangers are encouraged. Pair yourself up with a couple of other people and, go through this process with someone else. A lot of people are getting laid off kind of en masse. So maybe you have some former colleagues you could reach out to and have just kind of informal stand-up. I've really enjoyed that, but having something that gives your day a little bit of routine, a little bit of structure, helps kind of bring a sense of normalcy to this, because it can be tough kind of going out alone.
Awesome. Yeah. I think that's a great note to end on. So, Rob Brogan, I wish you luck in your job quest, your job search, and thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
Yeah, thanks so much.